this is the problem when you watch a boxing match. Because a lot of people watch a fight and many times they don't score the fight round by round. You heard Jim Lampley in his post-fight analysis and some of his post-fight interviews with the press say, well, I don't score fights, but I just feel Kovalev won. And the knockdown pretty much sealed the deal for him because he scored that knockdown, he won the fight. But when you look at boxing, I think a lot of people don't understand that you score a fight round by round using the 10-point must system. So to me, boxing is like a book. It's like a book with 12 chapters, with each round being a chapter. So a fighter could win 4 rounds and win them very decisively and may even score a knockdown in the 4 rounds or even 2 knockdowns in the 4 rounds. But he could lose, 8 rounds in very close fashion. His opponent could just narrowly beat him in those 8 rounds. His opponent could do just a little bit more in those 8 rounds. And people look at that and say, well, you know what? Those rounds that he won weren't as dominant as the rounds that the other fighter won, the 4 rounds, the guy who won the 4 rounds in dominant fashion. So if you're not scoring a fight round by round and you're just watching it and looking at the fight as if it's just one big round in itself instead of breaking it down into rounds, it's like a war is not just one battle. A war is many battles, it's many skirmishes. So you have to look at it like that. And that's the problem. Because in my opinion, yeah, the rounds Kovalev won, he won them clear. And the rounds that Ward won, I think he just won them narrowly. It wasn't like he set the world on fire. He did just enough to win those rounds because Kovalev, I felt, in the second half of this fight was slowing down. I thought the body work definitely took its toll on Kovalev. And, you may not have liked how, Ward got there inside and he held and he had one arm free and he was punching with the free hand, but he was doing work with the free hand. He was digging to the body. And you could see, Kovalev's body reddening up. And then you could see Kovalev not cutting the ring off as effectively as he was in the first half of the fight. He was basically following Andre Ward around. And he was slowing up just a bit, giving Ward that time to react and suck him into counter shots. And then in the second half of the fight, when Ward was tying him up, he was able to push him back. Whereas early in the fight when Ward was tying him up, Kovalev was pushing Ward back and even breaking free of the clinches. But because I felt Kovalev was tiring and Ward's physical tactics were starting to wear on Kovalev and the body shots were starting to wear on Kovalev, that slowed him down. Now you could sit there and say Ward's work was ugly and you may not have liked it as much as you liked Kovalev's work. And you could look at the rounds that Kovalev won and you could say, yeah, he clearly won those rounds. He actually did great work on those rounds. Whereas you could say, yeah, maybe Ward's work in the rounds that he won was kind of sloppy. He was kind of holding. He was using dirty tactics. But at the end of the day, when you hold or when you maul an opponent, it's up to the referee to break those clinches. And if you're clinching an opponent and you're walking him back, pushing him back, and, kind of fighting ugly, but, you're doing it just enough, and then you're actually releasing your opponent from the clinch, or you're punching with the free hand while you're in the clinch, the referee is going to let you fight out of those clinches if you're punching with the free hand, number one. And number two, if you're breaking that clinch before that referee can get in there, and then you're punching off the clinch, then you're taking full advantage of, being able to hold. It's like when you look at holding in boxing, yeah, holding is illegal. But it's basically like it's a minor infraction. It's like speeding. It's like comparing speeding to a DWI. So obviously a ref is going to look at holding as a minor infraction, and he's not going to look at it in the same way he would look at a low blow or a headbutt. Because a low blow or a headbutt is like a DWI, whereas, Holding is like a speeding ticket. So you get a speeding ticket. A lot of times you get it's a minor fine or whatever. So people say, yeah, holding's illegal. He should be disqualified. Yeah, but you're allowed as a fighter to push the envelope with holding. So if you're able to hold and punch free with the hand that's not being tied up, then a referee a lot of times will let you fight out of that clinch. Number one, and number two, if you're holding but you're not holding long enough, or you're pushing your opponent back, a lot of times the referee is seeing you, push your opponent back in this forward momentum. So he's looking at it as there's action, and maybe you're pushing him back and you're getting ready to release him and you're getting ready to punch. Whereas if you just see a guy standing there, like what Amir Khan does, is he just grabs and holds onto his opponent and he just tries to like freeze his opponent, but there's no, there's no other plan to do anything else but just sit there and freeze the action. Then it's different as a someone like Ward, who grabs his opponent, pushes him back, maneuvers him, wrestles him a little bit. A lot of times a referee will wait for the two boxers to kind of stop moving or be pushed up against the ropes, and they're tied up against the ropes and they're not really moving. A referee won't break someone until there's a freeze in the action, like neither fighter is moving. So if a fighter is grabbing and moving and pushing someone back, a lot of times the referee is going to give that fighter the benefit of the doubt, and he's going to let him try to work out of the clinch and fight out of the clinch. Whereas if it's just it's like an MMA, when a fighter is on top of the other fighter and he's just standing there and there's not any action, then they'll stand them both up. It's the same thing in holding a boxing. If a guy is holding somebody but he's actually punching with the free hand, or he's pushing his opponent back, and both guys are moving and wrestling, more often than not the referee is going to let you try and fight out of the clinch, and Ward takes full advantage of that. So you may not like how he does it, you may call it ugly, you may call it dirty, but it's a minor infraction, and he's doing just enough to kind of push that envelope but not get points taken away and getting disqualified. So it's totally different than when you see other fighters who just hold and they just stand there and they hold and they try to just freeze their opponent, and it's just basically like a prevent defense. Whereas when Ward holds, there's a method to his madness. He's looking to maneuver and punch with the free hand, looking to push his opponent back. He's looking to turn him into shots where he can line him up with shots. So again, you may not like it, but it's effective and it frustrates his opponents, and he definitely frustrated Kovalev in the second half of this fight, and that's where the ring generalship comes in, because Ward was definitely nullifying Kovalev's offense in the second half. I don't think either guy was landing a ton of punches. I don't think either guy was really landing combinations, but you could say early on, the rounds that Kovalev won, particularly that round, the second round where he knocked Ward down, his work was a little bit more decisive. But again, you have to score it round by round. And if you score it round by round, there were a lot of rounds where you could say that, there wasn't a ton of action, but Ward just maybe nicked it. And if you nick a round, you still win the round. So look at the fight and score the fight round by round. I'm not saying that Ward clearly won this fight. I did score it for him. I thought the second half of the fight was definitely a huge factor in me scoring the fight for him. I gave him actually the last 6 rounds. And 2 of the judges gave him the last 6 rounds, and 1 of the judges gave him 5 of the last 6 rounds. So, I clearly thought that Ward won the second half of the fight, but an argument could be made that maybe Kovalev won the 10th or the 12th. But I really thought that Ward won the 7th and the 8th. The 9th, I thought he won too. The 11th, I thought he won. So, the 10th I did give to him, and the 12th I did give to him. But, I could see those rounds going to Kovalev. I could just see a lot of different ways this fight could have ended up on the scoring. I see a lot of ways this fight could have ended up on the scoring. You could have had a multiple types of scorecards here, but at the end of the day, you got to score these fights round by round, and don't just look at the fight as just one big battle. No, it's a war with 12 skirmishes, and you have to look at each skirmish and say, who won that skirmish? You have to read that book and say, hey, you know what? Who did more in that chapter? You may not like the action in a particular chapter, but at the end of the day, you got to pick a winner. And if you want to score even, you can do that too. But you know what? Score the fight round by round. Learn how to use the 10-point must system. And, if I hear someone say, well, I didn't actually score the fight, but I thought Kovalev clearly won. I have a hard time with people saying they didn't score the fight round by round. They don't have a scorecard, but yet they're saying Kovalev won. Jim Lampley does that all the time. And, a judge is not allowed to do that. A judge just can't watch the fight and at the end say this guy won. He's got to provide a scorecard. He's got to score each round of the fight, and he's got to add up his rounds, and he's got to come up with a score at the end of the fight. So if you haven't taken the time to do that, which a lot of people don't, a lot of people watch these fights and they don't score them, but they just look at one particular fighter and they like what he's doing better than the other fighter, but they're not scoring the individual rounds, then again, I really can't put much stock in your opinion if you did not score the fight round by round. So if you did take the time to score the fight and you had Kovalev winning, I have no problem with that. If you did take the time to score the fight and you had Ward winning, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with a draw. I just think that this was a very close fight. There was a lot of rounds that could have went either way. And I thought the difference in this fight was the second half of the fight. I thought Kovalev definitely slowed up. I thought he started following Ward around, as I said. And I thought Ward did just enough to nick those rounds that Kovalev didn't do pretty much anything. So I thought Kovalev really slowed up, and Ward took advantage of that. You could tell by the body language that Ward was kind of getting a second win. He started coming forward a little bit more. He started pushing Kovalev back, whereas Kovalev definitely looked tired. He looked like he was getting frustrated, and he did not look like the same fighter as in he did the first 6 rounds. So definitely I think this was a close fight. Love to see a rematch, but you know what? It's not a robbery. It was a close fight that could have went either way. And if you want to call it a robbery, then it's totally up to you. But, boxing is not dead. Boxing is not, in a downward spiral. It's not the end of the world. Boxing is not going to all of a sudden disappear because Andre Ward got a close decision victory here. So this is not the end of boxing. So enough with the sky is falling from all you guys out there crying about this decision. You know what? Just accept Ward won a close fight. And that's pretty much it. At the end of the day, Ward won a close fight. Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.